The board will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg.
Here.
Alderman Cone.
Present.
Alderman Narayan. Alderman Devoti.
Present.
Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Cox Entwee. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys.
Here.
Alderwoman Tyus.
Present.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Present.
Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Present.
We have 15 present.
A quorum being present, we will be led in an opening reflection by the founder and director of operations of Diamond Divas, Eddie Ross, in observance of Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Thank you, President Green. At this time, I would like to present Ms. Shantasha Love, the Director of Business, to carry on with the prayer.
Amen. If we could close our eyes, our heads. Father God, in the name of Jesus, first, Lord, we want to take time first to say thank you. Thank you for life. Thank you for waking us up this morning, clothed in our right mind. Thank you for the activities of our limbs, God, and thank you, God, for another opportunity. Lord God, we thank you, God, for what we have experienced today. Thank you for the love that we felt already. Lord, and as we've gathered here today, God, I actually pray, God, for this board of aldermen. Lord God, we ask, God, that you would allow them, God, to serve from their hearts. Lord, we thank you, God, that even now you're protecting their family. God, as we pray, God, we ask that you will look upon their needs, God, as they serve this city. We thank you, God, in observance of Domestic Violence Awareness Month for every survivor. Lord, wrap your loving arms around them now, God, and help them understand that there is life after domestic violence. Lord, we thank you, God, even for those that are suffering right now in silence, God, that you would provide some form of silence. God, we thank you, God, that for those leaders that are in their area, their neighbors, God, their families, God, we thank you now that you're protecting them and you're giving them resources they need. Lord, and as we have come before you, God, we ask that you would help the city of St. Louis. God, we thank you, God, that even now you're going to help, God, with the crime and the violence that's in our city. Protect this city. Protect our children, God, in the name of Jesus. We thank you and we praise you and we love you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
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 Thank you so much. And I would be remiss if I didn't also just recognize real quickly the amazing amount of work that Diamond Divas has done, even beyond domestic violence, but when it comes to recovery from the May 16th tornado. So I would ask if we can give a quick round of applause to Diamond Divas for all of. And if we would like to gather on the steps for a picture for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, if we could please do that now.
Oh, I can go early. I'll get her down. Everyone else. Impressive. All right.
What all y'all got? What all y'all passing out? Okay.
Alderwoman from the 10th,
Are we on
did you
honor?
have something to say? No.
We on honor? I thought we were on honor gift.
Okay. This point in time, we will dispense with the regular order of business to take up the courtesy resolution calendar. Alderwoman from the 7th, you're suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing Resolution 127.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I would like to make a motion to suspend the rules to introduce Resolution 127.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 6th, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing Resolution 127. This is a non-debatable motion. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Devoti. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Saunier. Alderwoman Cox-Sentwy. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
We have 15 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 7th. If you could please place Resolution 127 at the end of the courtesy resolution calendar.
So noted.
This time, Alderwoman from the 7th, you may approach the dais with your special guest and resolution.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, may you please read the resolution?
Resolution number 127, honoring Chelsea Murtaugh. Whereas Chelsea Murtaugh, affectionately known as Murtaugh Inc., began serving as a legislative assistant in the 7th Ward on August of 2023 and has brought invaluable public service to the 7th Ward and to the city of St. Louis. And whereas Chelsea Murtaugh was born and raised in Edwardsville, Indiana, and pursued an undergraduate degree in political science, as well as a certificate of biological sciences from Indiana University. And whereas Chelsea came to St. Louis to pursue a Juris Doctorate at St. Louis University in 2011, and during her law studies, she co-founded Law Students for Reproductive Justice Chapter and served as the president of Phi Data Law Fraternity for 2 years. And whereas Chelsea graduated with her law degree from St. Louis University in 2014, the same year as the murder of Michael Brown, galvanizing her desire to use her law credentials to move the mantle of social justice forward. And whereas Chelsea's first job after law school was at Art City Defenders, while she also spent time practicing personal injury and immigration law before starting her own practice. And whereas Chelsea has served as a legal advisor for Abortion Action Missouri, where she helped support a number of legislative and political reproductive justice priorities, and served as the board of Missourians for Alternatives to Death Penalty. And whereas Chelsea was part of the original class of legislative assistants for the Board of Aldermen and has provided a wealth of knowledge and support to the team of legislative assistants. And whereas her official role with the City of St. Louis, Chelsea has supported and helped pass historic legislation such as the Tax Accountability and Development Act, regulations around for-profit drone surveillance, housing development, and a vast number of other initiatives that focus on improving the city for all and not some of its residents. And whereas in her official role, she attended over 500 neighborhood meetings, helped to execute 8 town halls, put in over 350 Citizen Service Bureau requests. And whereas Chelsea is a proud homeowner in the Benton Park West neighborhood, a longtime active member of the Benton Park West Neighborhood Association, a founding member of the neighborhood group Foresters, and completed UMSO's Neighborhood Leadership Academy. And whereas Chelsea holds a master's in gardening certificate, is known for all things plants from gifting to harvesting to picking, and whose favorite coping mechanism is pulling the weeds from her garden. And whereas Chelsea is the proud fur mom to Kenny and the late Kilroy and Carol, and wife to Robert Vossmeyer, and whereas Alderwoman Saunier and many residents across the 7th Ward are forever grateful to Chelsea's unwavering commitment, principles, and dedication to the community. And whereas Chelsea's departure is a loss for the city of St. Louis, for her work and impact will live on forever. Now, therefore, be it resolved by this Honorable Board of Aldermen and the City of St. Louis that we pause now deliberations to honor Chelsea Murtaugh for her contributions to our board and city. We further direct the clerk of the board to spread a copy of this resolution across the minutes of these proceedings and to prepare a commemorative copy such they may be presented at a time and place deemed appropriate by the sponsor. Introduced this third day of October 2025 by the Honorable Alicia Saunier, Alderwoman of the 7th Ward.
Thank you, Madam Clerk and members of the board. I think that resolution really captures a lot of it. I know Chelsea she's hating standing here right now. She's hating to be in the spotlight. But I think all of us who have legislative assistants, when we first started this, we didn't know what this role would look like. We didn't know what it would be. It hadn't existed at the Board of Aldermen before, and she was part of the original group. And I hear all the time from other LAs just like how helpful she is. I'm sure many of us have gotten plants from her pickling, her gardening. And so I'm so grateful to you. I know that our community is so grateful for you. I think it's really rare to find someone who will roll up their sleeves and do what you need to do for your community. And, whatever I have wanted to do, if we needed to go and knock 600 doors for a town hall, if we needed to write some legislation or work on something that we knew would be difficult or, not have conversations, you have been there and you have been unwavering and you have stayed principled. I really want to just thank you so much for being yourself, for being consistent, and for sticking with me through some of the really difficult times that have happened many times on this camera. And just thank you for really, I know it's weird because legislative assistants and alders, sometimes it's a hierarchy, but I don't really feel hierarchical in our relationship. I feel like we've really been partners. And it's just the two of us for each office. So you have to have that. And so I will never be able to do enough to show you my gratitude. I will never be enough to say thank you for everything that you've done for me and that we've been able to do together. But I'm so appreciative of you. I think you're so brilliant. I think your heart is so pure. You've done so much good for people. You don't even want credit for it. You're not scared of things when they're not popular. You really do stick to things. I love you. I'm going to love you forever. I'm excited for your journey. I'm excited for where you're headed. And I wanted to do this because I think this is the type of gratitude and love that we should show our staff here, and especially the person who has been beside me for every step of the way. So I hope today you feel just a bit of that gratitude and a bit of that love and a bit of that appreciation.
So I was wholly unprepared to speak, so I'll just keep my comments brief. I've been in St. Louis politics for a very long time, and this by far has been the most fulfilling part because there's so much that we can do here at the Board of Aldermen. There really is. You all are the driving force behind this city, and you have so many opportunities ahead to make the world a better place for all of St. Louis. The only thing I would challenge you all, this is what I've been saying to myself to keep myself from crying, but when you leave a place better than you found it, it makes it a little bit easier to leave. But it's going to be really, really hard to leave St. Louis, even though I know I left it better than I came here. So thank you all for giving me the opportunity to work with you. Thank you, Alicia, for Alderwoman Saunier, for after my marriage being like the most fulfilling partnership I've ever had. Truly, because we've done so much in just 2 years. 2 years, and I'm so excited to see what you're able to do after I've left, and all of you. I challenge you all to make St. Louis better than you came here, better than you found it, because that's the only way we're going to get through these dark times.
Alderwoman from the 11th.
Thank you, Madam. Ooh, let me back up a little bit. Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. As I was sitting here thinking about you leaving Chelsea, I thought about the immortal Carol Burnett. It seems that we just got started and now it's time to say so long. I am so appreciative of just a human being that you are. I'm so sorry I'm going to be losing my mint dealer, but she gave me a nice plant that I gave to my husband because my thumbs are truly brown. I can't grow anything but children. So, but you have truly been a joy here at the Board of Aldermen, and you have made a significant contribution that will be missed. And so my prayer is that as you take flight to go on to wherever it is that God would have you be, that you have an abundance of love and joy and energy to keep moving forward. Thank you.
Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I just want to say to Chelsea, I love you and just sending you all positive vibes on your next endeavor. You know, fun fact is, even though you spent the last several years with the Alderwoman, I claim you almost first because, you know, I think I first met you back in 2013 when you was running for office in the 7th Ward, and I was out there knocking on doors for you and just had the opportunity to work with you on different issues when it comes to city politics and multiple campaigns. And I'm going to miss, you know, going into the 7th Ward office and doing a little banter with my daughter of the 7th Ward, and you always taking up for it. I'm like, Chelsea. But no, you are going to be truly missed. You bring a wealth of knowledge to the board. You are one of the original OGs of the LAs that started here. You've been super helpful with me. I know you and Matt have a really good relationship and been helpful in the 14th Ward as well. And, you know, definitely going to miss you. This isn't a goodbye. It's just a see you later. And I'm sure you'll be hitting us up about things that we can do to make St. Louis be even better. So I love you, sis.
Alderwoman from the 6th. Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I'll keep it brief. Best of luck moving forward, and I move that we make this resolution in.
Second.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 10th, that we make Resolution 27 in bank. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. It is embanked. Alderwoman from the 6th.
Thank you, Madam President. Chelsea, I just want to say thank you for your passion. I think your courage, your desire to just help everybody and make it a better place. Bree wasn't able to be here today. She had a funeral. I know she really wanted to be here. I want to thank you for your friendship, your desire to not care who is sponsoring a bill, but to make that legislation be the best thing, whatever it is, and put the thing we're doing above the person doing it, which putting politics or the legislation above, you know what I'm trying to say. But thank you for being you. Thank you for the care and you've taken with everything you've done, all the hard work you've put in for everybody, really to make this place a better place, but to St. Louis a better place, your friendship. And I think I do speak for Bree. Thank you for your friendship for our ward. And just thank you for all that you do. And we'll miss you. And please maybe save me a spot on a guest bed, maybe.
Any further discussion? I'll just say I don't think it's coincidence that this week it was announced that we have a nonstop flight from here to London. So there is no excuses to not come back and visit, or to, as the Alderwoman from the 6th said, roll out a guest bed for some of us who may travel across the pond. So known you for a very long time, and we could not be more proud of your next steps, but also really heartbroken for losing you and your knowledge and work ethic here at the board. You've made a tremendous difference here, so good luck on your next endeavors. If we could please gather on the steps for a picture.
Tall. In the picture.
Miss Ora Hicks wanted to talk to you. She was trying to get your attention coming up the steps. Miss Ora Hicks.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, if I could please be added as a co-sponsor to Resolution 124.
So noted.
Thank you. With that, Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized on the motion to adopt the courtesy resolution consent calendar.
Madam Clerk, I would like to be added to Resolution 124 as well. I move that we adopt the courtesy resolution consent calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st, that we adopt the courtesy resolution consent calendar. Is there any discussion? Alderwoman from the 7th.
Sorry. Madam Clerk, may you add me as co-sponsor to Resolution 124 as well?
So noted.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, it's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st, that we adopt the courtesy resolution consent calendar. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Aye. Motion carries. Introduction of honored guests. Any introduction of honored guests? Alderman from the 2nd.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the board. We have some very special guests that I want to honor today. Why don't you guys stand up? They're up in the balcony. We have Derek, Kalia, Timothy, and Owen from the Vocational Skills Program in St. Louis County Special School Districts. These young adults work downtown at the Embassy Suites every day working on vocational and life skills, and they're doing a great job. We got their teachers, Chuck and Shantae, up there as well, and we welcome them to the city. You guys are doing great. Keep up the good work. You are our honored guest at the St. Louis Board of Aldermen, and we honor you today.
Alderwoman from the 11th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. So my honored guests today are all of the hardworking people over at Powell Symphony Hall. They are finally open and back up and doing the work. The Sheldon was there yesterday or day before. The days are running together, but they cut the ribbon on their renovation, and their first night they were sold out. And so my honored guests are all of the people who worked on that project. State Representative Dale Taylor, who worked very hard to help get some funding for the renovation at Powell Hall. I am certainly appreciative of all of the businesses and entertainment venues that are in the elevated 11th Ward. Thank you.
Need further introduction, Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Today, as my honored guest, I would love to have Black contractors as well as the Hispanic Chamber and other contractors that have been working with alders here to make sure that we are uplifting and ensuring that we have a strong MWBE process. We had a press conference this morning, and I just want to thank all the contractors that have been coming together in a unified way to make sure that we have strong legislation in the future, as well as I'm sure the Alderwoman from the 10th will introduce them as well, but I also like to have Diamond Divas as my honored guest this morning. Thank you.
Any further introduction of honored guests? Alderwoman from the 10th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I thought they were still here, but I didn't want to miss this opportunity, not only to welcome them, Diamond Diva Empowerment Foundation as my honored guest, but also publicly thank them. Listen, 140 days it's been since that tornado ripped through the city of St. Louis, and they have been on the ground 140 days. The first 3 calls I got were Diamond Diva Empowerment Foundation, Latanya Lenore of Walmart, and Kayla Reed of Action St. Louis. And it means the world to me, to constituents, to our city, that they showed up, showed out, and are still there. So I want to thank Diamond Diva Empowerment Foundation. It was already mentioned about the work they do on behalf of domestic violence survivors here in the city of St. Louis, 365 days a year, but October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So we escalate, advocate, and uplift it even more. And what they have here today for us are purple light bulbs that we can put in front of our homes in honor and solidarity, again, in advocacy for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So please make sure before you leave today that you grab your purple light bulb and then share with your constituents that they can connect with Diamond Divas Empowerment Foundation to get their own purple light bulb in advocacy and to participate in the walk to shatter the violence and stop the silence on October 18th in the Grove. Thank you.
Any further introduction of honored guests? Any further introduction of honored guests? I also want to recognize that I think we have a group from the Eco-Socialists here up in the gallery today, and we'll want to make sure that they are treated as our honored guests as well. With that, Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the approval of the minutes from Friday, September 26, 2025.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we approve the minutes from Friday, September 26, 2025.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Aldermen from the 14th, that we approve the minutes from Friday, September 26, 2025. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Report of city officials.
Report of city officials can be found in A, B, C of the agenda and has placed in the Google Drive for your review. I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for the appointment to the 2019 Grand Center Community Improvement District, Arnez Newton. I have the pleasure to submit. You going to do that one? Go ahead. You going to do them separately, or you going to do them all together?
One at a time.
Okay.
Alderwoman from the 11th, you are recognized on Mayor Spencer's appointments to the 2019 Grand Center Community Improvement District.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we accept the mayor's recommendation or nomination of Arnez Newton to the Grand Center Community Improvement District.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 11th, seconded by the Alderman for the 14th, that we approve Mayor Spencer's appointments to the Grand Center Community Improvement District. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for the Art Museum Subdistrict, the appointment of Dr. Donald Scruggs and Emily Rao Pulser.
Alderman from the 9th, you are recognized on Mayor Spencer's appointments to the Art Museum Subdistrict.
Thank you. I would move that we accept the mayor's recommendations for the Art Museum Subdistrict of Dr. Donald Suggs and Emily Pulitzer.
Second.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 9th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 11th, that we approve Mayor Spencer's appointments to the Art Museum Subdistrict. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Does anyone wish to take any bills or resolutions off of any of our informal calendars? Anyone wish to take any bills or resolutions off of any of our informal calendars? Seeing none, Alderwoman from the 1st, you are recognized on the motion to suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing Board Bill 78 for first reading.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, I move to suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing Board Bill number 78.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 10th, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing Board Bill 78. This is a non-debatable motion. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Aye. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Devoti. Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Sonier. Alderwoman Cox-Antwi. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Aye. Alderwoman Laura Keys. Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Cone. We have 15 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 1st. Madam Clerk, if you could please place Board Bill 78 at the end of the first reading of Board.
So noted.
First reading of Board Bills.
Board Bill 76, sponsored by Alderwoman Tyus, pursuant to ordinance number 70333, as amended by ordinance number 71394, an ordinance directing the Director of Streets to install speed humps to calm the flow of traffic on the 4700 block of Farland, Margaretta, Kossuth, San Francisco, and Sacramento in the Penrose neighborhood, the 3900 to the 4200 blocks of Evans, and the 800 and 1400 blocks of Pendleton in the Vanderveer Lewis Place neighborhood. Board Bill 70, sponsored by Alderwoman Tyus, an ordinance pertaining to the regulation of traffic speeding along Kings Highway, Memorial Boulevard between Dr. Martin Luther King Drive and Bircher Boulevard, located south of Interstate 70. Board Bill, and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 70, sponsored by Alderwoman Schweitzer, an ordinance updating the Forestry Division's regulation relating to weeds, native plants, and other vegetation in the city of St. Louis, containing definitions, reporting, abatement, enforcement, and severability provisions. That's the extent of first reading of board bills.
We could please assign Board Bill 78 to the Health and Human Development Committee.
So noted.
Reference to Committee of Board Bills.
To the Public Infrastructure Board Bills number 76 and 77 to help, 76 and 77 to Health and Human Development Board Bill 78.
Second reading report of standing committees.
The following board bills were reported out of the Legislation and Rules Committee with a due pass recommendation. Board Bill 64, sponsored by Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, an ordinance to repeal certain sections of Chapter 22.8 within the revised code of the City of St. Louis, regulating to the Zoological Board of Control and remove them from the City Code. Board Bill 65, sponsored by Alderwoman Velasquez, an ordinance to repeal various obsolete boards and commissions established under city ordinances and to remove them from the City Code. That's Board Bill 71, passed out of Public Infrastructure and Facilities with a due pass recommendation, sponsored by Alderman Oldenburg, pursuant to ordinance number 70333, as amended by ordinance number 71394, an ordinance directing the Director of Streets to install speed humps to calm the flow of traffic on various blocks in the Second Ward. Board Bill 72, sponsored by Alderman Oldenburg, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Alderman Devotie, and Alderman Browning, an ordinance authorizing the honorary street name Brian McKenna Way, pursuant to ordinance number 68937, which shall begin at the intersection of Childress and Nottingham Street and run east on Nottingham Street to the intersection of Tam Avenue and Nottingham Street. Board Bill 73, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Service to conditionally vacate above surface and subsurface rights for vehicles, equestrian, and pedestrian travel in the 13th Street from Cole to Dr. Martin Luther King Drive, the 12-foot wide north-south alley in the City Block 270 as bounded by Carr Street, Tucker Boulevard, Cole Street, and 13th Street, and the 20-foot wide east-west alley in the City Block 574 as bounded by Cole Street, 13th Street, Dr. Martin Luther King Drive, and 14th Street in the City of St. Louis, Missouri, as herein described in accordance with Charter Authority in conformity with Section 14 of Article 21 of the Charter and imposing certain conditions on such vacation. Out of Public Safety, Board Bill 74, sponsored by Alderman Narayan, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing the City Emergency Management Agency to accept mitigation grant program funding in the amount of $697,678.87 from the State of Missouri Emergency Management Agency, appropriating said funds, and a required city match for such funds, authorizing the expenditure of such funds to the extent received, and authorizing contracts and other documents to expend such funds to the extent received and contain that emergency clause. That's the extent of second reading and report of standing committees.
Madam Clerk, if you could please make sure that I am added as a co-sponsor on 64 and 65.
So noted.
Thank you. Report of special committees.
We have none.
Board bills for perfection consent.
Board Bill for Perfection Consent. Board Bill 61, sponsored by Alderwoman Schweitzer, pursuant to Ordinance number 70333, as amended by Ordinance number 71394, and ordinance directing the Director of Streets to install speed humps to calm the flow of traffic in the First Ward. Board Bill 52, sponsored by Alderwoman Boyd, an ordinance repealing the Ordinance number 71644 concerning the issuance of liquor licenses and enacting a new ordinance prohibiting the issuance of any packaged or drink liquor license for any currently non-licensed premises within the boundaries of the 13th Ward Liquor License Control District and contain an emergency and severability clause. That's the extent of board bills for perfection consent.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized on the motion to adopt the board bills for perfection consent.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we adopt the board bills for perfection consent calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt the board bills for the perfection consent calendar. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Board bills for perfection.
Board Bill 69, sponsored by Alderman Narayan, President Green, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, and Alderman Aldridge. An ordinance to amend Ordinance number 70800 to establish the rules of conduct pertaining to inspections and inspector qualifications regarding heating, boilers, pressure valves, and steam generators in ordinance with the National Board Inspection Code.
Alderman from the 4th, you're recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 69.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, I move that we perfect Board Bill 69.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we perfect Board Bill number 69. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. This board bill is a really straightforward bill to address an issue that happened back in 2017 when the Lay Lange Box Company off Russell had an explosion in a boiler. It sent a 1-ton boiler hundreds of feet in the air. One person was killed in the initial explosion. 3 people were killed where the boiler landed, including a newlywed couple who was literally on their first day on that job. As a result of this incident, the Chemical Safety Board, which is a federal agency that's tasked with investigating incidents like this, put forward some recommendations to prevent this kind of thing from happening again under our mechanical code. And this bill just implements their recommendations. And I ask for your favorable consideration.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I would just like to commend the aldermen for the work on this legislation and request to be added as co-sponsor.
Please make note of
So
that.
noted.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 6th.
Can you add me as a co-sponsor as well?
Madam
So
Clerk,
noted.
please make note of that. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Alderman from the 4th, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, I renew my motion.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we perfect Board Bill number 69. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Board Bill 70, as amended in committee by Alderman Aldridge, pursuant to Ordinance number 70333, as amended by Ordinance number 71394, the Director of Streets to hereby directed to install speed humps to calm the flow of traffic on certain blocks in the 14th Ward.
Alderman from the 14th, you're recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 70 as amended in committee.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Members of the board, I move to third read and final pass Board Bill 70 as amended.
Perfect.
Perfect. Board Bill 70 as amended in committee.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we perfect Board Bill number 70 as amended in committee. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, I move to adopt the floor substitute to Board Bill 70 as amended in committee.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt the floor substitute for Board Bill 70. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, the floor sub just include 2 streets that was left off where we were making the committee amendment. So just adding those streets in the 14th Ward for speed humps. And with that, I'll open up for questions.
Is there any discussion on the motion to adopt the floor sub? Any discussion on the motion to adopt the floor sub? Seeing none, it's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt the floor substitute for Board Bill 70. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman from the 14th, you are now recognized on Board Bill 70 floor substitute.
I renew my motion.
You need to make a new motion to adopt or to perfect.
All right. Make the motion to perfect Board Bill 70 floor substitute.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 11th, that we perfect Board Bill 70 floor substitute. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Report of engrossment.
We have none.
Third reading and final passage of board bills consent.
We have none.
Third reading and final passage of board bills.
We have none.
Report of the finally passed and signed by the President.
We have none.
First reading resolutions in reference to committees.
First reading resolutions. Resolution 126, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge, President Green, Alderwoman Velazquez, Alderwoman Saunier, Alderwoman Cox Antwi, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Alderwoman Keys, and Alderwoman Boyd. Now therefore be it resolved by the Honorable Board of the Aldermen of the City of St. Louis that this body calls upon all general contractors, subcontractors, developers, and private sector partners engaged in city projects or projects receiving city incentives to honor existing MWBE participation commitments made prior to or during the pause in program administration, comply with Executive Order 91 by maintaining and supporting participation consistent with established goals, refrain from removing or excluding minority and women-owned contractors from ongoing or upcoming projects solely due to the pause in our program administration, and affirm their commitment to advancing equality, inclusion, and opportunity in the City of St. Louis. That's the extent of first reading of resolution in reference to committee.
Alderman from the 14th, you are recognized on the first reading resolution 126.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Resolution 126 is a resolution that is really codifying.
Alderman, are you asking for unanimous consent today?
I kept looking at you, it's like, was she going to stop me at some point? I'm asking for unanimous consent.
Hearing no objection, Alderman, you may proceed.
Do you want me to adopt or talk first?
So you can, yes, you can now ask to adopt.
I move to adopt Resolution 126.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt Resolution 126. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the board. Resolution 126 is a unified effort, with myself and all the older people that have signed on as a co-sponsor to not only, say that we support Executive Order 91 that now continues the process of MWBE, but also stand with contractors and subcontractors in calling for a strong MWBE bill in the near future. It's been an honor to be able to work with Alderwoman Velazquez, Alderwoman Saunier, Alderwoman Cox Antwi, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Alderwoman Keys, and Alderwoman Boyd, and to have your support on this, Madam President, because as we move forward, we know there will be an MWBE bill coming forward, but we have heard when this pause happened and reinstatement from contractors, it put people, I would say, in limbo. And moving forward, as we bring a new MWBE bill, I would say we have to be very committed, especially in the type of administration that we have, that not only we protect minority and women business contractors, but we also make sure that our language in the new bill is stronger than the previous one. So I want to thank my colleagues for doubling down and saying that we care about minority and women businesses, and we are committed to making sure we have a strong bill over these next few weeks.
Any further discussion? Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you. I just want to stand in support of this resolution and ask that I be added as a
Madam Clerk, please make note of that.
So noted.
Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I just wanted to make sure that I put on record, I know we've talked a little bit about it individually and on social media, but we did have a town hall collectively this past Saturday, and it went really well. It was so nice to hear more about the history of it, of MWBE, and how it came into existence, to hear directly from contractors and people who we hope will benefit and be able to be included in processes because of legislation like this, about specific things that we can improve on in this. It was nice to see all of us work together and be kind of in alignment on where we're going and where we're hoping to go. And so I just wanted to say that the town hall went really well. I wanted to thank on the record all of the contractors, and especially MOCAN and APTA, for being involved with us and being at the table, and just really express that I hope this resolution just a sign that that collective energy and spirit is still there as we begin to work on codifying the most recent disparity study and executive order.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 6th.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to echo my colleagues. I also want to say thank you for their leadership and for our collaboration. I do want to say I think this MBWE program is important to everybody at the city, and just stress that it does support what the Executive Order 91 that the mayor already signed. It also, as my colleague Alderwoman Senier said, it does support the existing disparity study that we were already set to work on, as this body does, because as history points out, it is upon us to make sure that we remedy the history of discrimination been in St. Louis, which is why we had the consent decree. And the new disparity will not only work to remedy that, but will expand us to expand the program to business service, to professional services contracts. And with that, I do believe it's in the best interest of the city to do that. So I move that we pass this resolution in bank.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 6th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we make Resolution 126 in bank. Is there any discussion on the motion to embank? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Resolution 126 is now in bank. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, Alderman from the 14th, you are recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, and thank you to all my colleagues at the board for embanking this resolution. With I renew my motion to adopt Resolution 126.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt Resolution 126. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Second reading resolutions, committee reports and adoptions.
Resolution 111, sponsored by Alderwoman Spicer. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Aldermen of the City of St. Louis that we pause in our deliberations to affirm our support for Executive Order 92 and join Mayor Spencer in directing the creation of a thoughtful and comprehensive framework regulating data centers in the City of St. Louis.
Alderwoman from the 1st, you are recognized on the second reading of Resolution 111.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, I move that we adopt Resolution 111.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt Resolution 111. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, and thank you for everyone who attended this hearing. On this a few days ago on Wednesday, we had a great discussion. But to go over some top points of this resolution, number one, it's affirming resolution number 92, which has already been signed by Mayor Spencer, and that does a few things. One of the first things is that it makes data centers a use that is only conditionally permitted, not permitted by right in the areas that they might be allowed. I think that's a huge change. And when they're conditionally permitted, they now have to go through a process of answering 40 questions before they're being heard in the conditional use process, which are outlined in Resolution 111. And then it sets up a framework for regulations in the future and a 5-month timeline for our city staff to put these regulation recommendations together. Some of the most important things I think here to consider are our residents' utility rates. That's something that's really important to me. If there are cases where we have new data centers being considered in our city that are going to raise the rates of utilities on our residents, I think that's something we need to know about and something we need to be aware of and very concerned about and regulate. I'm also very concerned about the use of water in the data centers going forward. That's something that we hear a lot about the incredible amounts of water that can be used by data centers. We all know that our infrastructure here in the city of St. Louis, our water infrastructure is fragile and needs a lot of investment. So there could be some ways to mutually benefit. But if we are just going to be harmed as residents of the city from overuse of an already fragile infrastructure system, we need to be aware of that, and we need to think about that whenever we're looking at potential uses for property. And I think those are some of my main concerns about it. And I think that, whenever we're talking about regulating an industry, we have to be really thoughtful about doing that. The public needs to be involved, and I'm very happy that so many people did take their time out of their day on Wednesday to give feedback on all sides of the issue. There's really a lot of points that were brought up that I thought were really interesting and important to consider. From all sides of the issue, whether that is talking about the economic benefits that may exist with this emerging industry, or the environmental concerns, or the concerns about costs that could be passed on to the residents and vibrancy of our city if this is a use that is chosen in various areas. I really appreciate my colleagues on the committee who voted to support this, and I hope that the rest of us are able to vote for this today as well, and we're able to move it forward. I'm happy to answer any questions and would love to hear the thoughts of my colleagues.
Any further discussion? Alderman from the 2nd.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I'm going to start and finish with the same phrase today: is how did we get here? How did we get to the newest boogeyman of the city of St. Louis, the data center? Almost like this issue fell out of the sky, so I think we all had to educate ourselves very quickly on data centers, their impacts, etc. I want to be perfectly clear. I rise in support of a resolution that regulates in a very thoughtful and transparent way the development of data centers. Absolutely. I also want to be clear. That could have happened. The planning department, the zoning folks, they're digging into this issue. All of which could have happened without the threat of a moratorium, an executive order, and this very resolution. I argue those 3 steps have been detrimental already and have done damage to our economic development prospects and our investment outlook. What's the old cliche? It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. I'd like to talk about the journey today and how difficult and impactful that is to our economic development strategy here in the St. Louis city. Would the Alderwoman from the 1st please yield for questions?
The Alderwoman from the 1st yields questioning from the Alderman from the 2nd.
Yes.
Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Alderwoman. I appreciate you taking questions. Can you first start with maybe where this started? Why is this resolution in front of us today? The genesis of it. I got to tell you, I got asked by a handful of my constituents, are data centers falling out of the sky and hurting people? Why has this all of a sudden become a topical issue? So if you could maybe, I know you sit on the Planning Commission, so if you could maybe just educate us.
Thank you, Alderman, for the questions. So to begin with, this isn't something that has fallen from the sky at all. The Planning Commission was recommended at the beginning of the year. The planning staff put together a memo that outlines the priorities for the Planning Commission's discussion over the next year. One of those items was regulations of data centers. So this has been something that has been in the beginning processes of the Planning Commission and the Planning Commission's mind of how to move that regulation forward. Within the last few weeks, though, you probably saw a lot of attention around a data center in St. Charles and the efforts in St. Charles to have a moratorium on data centers there. I think that spurred a lot of conversation in our city, and there was a recommendation by the Planning Commission to have a moratorium, and that was a recommendation that was suggested by staff in the city of St. Louis. At that time, the Planning Commission, which I'm a part of, did vote unanimously to move a moratorium suggestion to the Board of Aldermen, saying, hey, Board of Aldermen, we suggest that you put in place a moratorium. That's the direction that I assumed we'd go. But in talking with many of my colleagues and the mayor, it seems like there wasn't the appetite to move that forward at the Board of Aldermen. And so, here we have in front of us what I think, and I appreciate your comments on it, a very thoughtful piece of, affirmation of an executive order, which was very thoughtful, I think, that puts into place current ways to regulate an industry. We already use the conditional use process, as you know, widely in the city of St. Louis for uses of parcels in our city that may not immediately conform to the zoning code. Data centers were already conditional uses in many parts of the zoning code because they were treated as warehouses, which I hope we can all agree that data centers are not warehouses in a traditional sense. So what this executive order did is it defined a data center and outlined where it would be allowed as a conditional use and put in place those questions and parameters for the conditional use process. So what it does is use a process that's already existing in our city, which we use, it's a once a week hearing, basically, that happens in the city of St. Louis for uses that don't necessarily immediately conform with the zoning code and are listed as conditional uses, and allows the data centers to be used that way. But as you know, there's been a tremendous amount of public pushback in both directions, really. I think there's a lot of public. I certainly have gotten many emails from people who say they're horrified by any pivot away from a moratorium, and they think that I've made a bad decision. They think that we are all making a bad decision in not heading that direction, and I understand where they're coming from. But this is something that we can do now, that I think we have the support for at the board, that allows a much more thoughtful process than we had 2 weeks ago. And so that's why I'm supporting it and why I'm moving it forward today.
Thank you, Alderwoman. You mentioned that the Planning Commission, and the timing here is important, that the Planning Commission recommended a moratorium. But there was some options, right? There was sort of a menu laid out in a memo, I think dated September 8th, that you all took up in the Planning Commission on September 10th, that said, here are directions we can go, right? There was sort of a hybrid, right, option where we can immediately try to just get some regulations in place. And I'm just referring to, I think, the memo you sent us all a couple of weeks ago. This is to the City of St. Louis Planning Commission from Don Rowe, Executive Director. And if you flip to the last page in this, there are a number of general ways the city can proceed. Act rapidly and put in interim zoning regulations in place, quickly develop regulations to address the emerging land use that was not considered under the 1950 zoning code. Well, couldn't agree with that more. However, because of the current zoning code structure, the work is already underway to rewrite the zoning code. Potential amendment likely to come in place, but it would put some codes immediately and regulations in place. It would not align with the strategic land use plan, however, it is an option. Similarly, the city could rapidly update benchmarking its ordinance to ensure transparency of large data centers through its BEEPS ordinance. So that was another option. Then finally, number 2, establish a moratorium while a full body of regulations are developed. But then even beyond that, it could have been looked at a difference, and I think you all discussed this. You could have split the baby here, and really large data centers could have contained a moratorium, and the more mid or low-sized ones could have continued to go forward while still working on zoning regulations, correct?
Right, and as you know, anytime...
So that they recommended, the Planning Commission recommended options. They didn't recommend a moratorium.
The Planning Commission did, as one of the options, recommend a moratorium, and as I said, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend a moratorium as what the Board of Aldermen did. But yes, you're absolutely right that there are options, and we're taking one of them.
Were these options discussed at all in that September 10th meeting? Do you know?
The regulations were discussed. The only thing that got a vote was the moratorium.
You only got a motion, a second, and a vote.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I want to make sure I got the timing right. This memo refers to, in April of this year, the Planning Commission prioritized data center regulations and as one of the 4 near-term zoning items. You discussed that. The others were minimum lot size reform, correct? And accessory dwelling units, also passed, and cannabis cafes, right? These were the 4 near-term zoning items that the Planning Commission was prioritizing. Was there I mean, the data centers are such an impact. Why did we move forward first with minimum lot size or accessory dwelling units, and why have they not even taken up cannabis cafes yet?
I appreciate that question. And with the minimum lot sizes and the accessory dwelling units, those have both been pieces of legislation that our colleagues have worked on for years and just moved this session. So this is something that, they've already had a lot of time and discussion on, and data centers is one that is just been brought up within the last year.
Okay, so it sounds like minimum lot sizes and ADUs were prioritized because there was already a good amount of work associated with those. Data centers weren't on the radar.
Already legislation, already regulation, things were already
Got
written,
it.
already sponsors confirmed. I mean, I know you know the answer to this question, but that's the answer.
And okay, so
Doing great.
we're looking at, this was referencing in April, these 4 near-term items were brought up to the Planning Commission. Then data centers weren't discussed at all in the August plan, at least according to its minutes. Do you recall at all a conversation?
They were not discussed.
They're not
right?
discussed in the August meeting. August 22nd, August 14th, St. Charles's, it hit the papers, St. Charles's data center applicants pulled their application. So that was on August 14th. August 22nd, the St. Charles City Council, in all their wisdom, unanimously voted to impose a 1-year moratorium on all data centers. Now, so between August 22nd and this memorandum here of September 8th, the planning and zoning staff really pulled together a lot of research and drafted this letter dated September 8th, just 2 days before the Planning Commission meeting, where it recommended those options, one of them being a moratorium. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So, I'd like to go through this memo a little bit more if we could. The subject, of course, is land use, environmental, and economic consideration. And if I'm flipping to page 3 here, where it talks about environmental, energy, and justice considerations. And it's well cited. And it talks about that these centers also use large amounts of water and refrigerant equipment to maintain indoor temperature. You also noted, when you were seeking a motion to pass and adopt this, that, well, let me see, I wrote it down. The use of water is a lot of water, and we have a fragile water system. Okay, so, and it says 15 megawatt data center would use 20 to 30 million gallons of water. So if I'm making the math easy here, 15 times 7 is a 105 square foot facility. That would classify as a large data, smaller mid-size. And if it's using 20 million gallons of water a year, that would be 140, again, times 7 here. That would be 140 million gallons of water a year that a large data center would use. I'm not asking you to corroborate my math, but that is the math. But then I have, so that's a large data center would use 140 gallons of water a year. I have here, right from the city's website, the St. Louis Water Division. This doesn't sound like a fragile infrastructure that can produce water. And right on the first page, it says about, 15 lines down, between the 2 St. Louis facilities combined, these 2 plants have the capacity to treat and distribute 380 million gallons of water per day. Per day. So in 2 days, right, we double the capacity of one large data center in terms of its water usage. I'm using easy math there. So to categorize our water system as fragile and to say that our water system is going to potentially run dry, which testimony was given in committee earlier to that effect, I think is also unhelpful to the economic development community and any prospects to investment. So I think that's a very misleading statement. We obviously have a lot of water. I mean, we can produce in one day, right, half of what a large data center facility.
I don't know if there's a question mark at the end of that, but I certainly have had many water main breaks in my ward. I know we had one recently at the edge of our 2 wards that shut down people's water. Around it, Schnucks was out of water. These are systems that are fragile, Aldermen, whether you want to believe it or not. This is something that we're dealing with very regularly in our city with difficulties in delivering the service to residents. And when you add large scale customers on top of that, it's going to be something that we need to consider with offering services in the city of St. Louis. I'm not arguing that our city doesn't have capacity to produce more water. It certainly does, and I think that's really important. But I also think that when you talk about adding large-scale customers, we have to be aware of the frailty of our current system as well.
Sure, that's fair. Can you help me out? And I'm only asking you this, Alderwoman, because you're on the Planning Commission. Can you help me out why other zoning regulations may have not been considered or prioritized in the 4 near terms? Because I've got a couple that I think could really rise in priority, and I'm just wondering how that process, comes to prioritizing.
With this executive order and the resolution?
No, I'm sorry. I'm back on.
Yeah, with the building
4 near-term items.
Standards, that's a really important piece that was recommended, and that's what BEP stands for in the planning division, the recommendations. That is something that we have in here as one of the regulations that needs to be considered. Because data centers had been regulated as warehouses up until this executive order, they weren't subject to having to provide that information.
Sure.
So that is something that, needed a definition of data centers, needed a knowledge of how much data energy they're using to begin with to move towards regulating their use and the ability to decrease the amount of use.
Okay, that's helpful. I would argue that the Planning Commission missed the mark, and there are other zoning regulations that certainly should have been prioritized, all while working on data center regulation. One that comes to mind is smoke shops or vape shops. I think you could argue that those have a negative impact on the quality of life and could be detrimental to society at large. I think if the Planning Commission wants to scrutinize a potential use, data centers, again, could be worked on, putting thoughtful regulations in place, but could also look to scrutinize smoke shops and zoning and the zoning regulations around them. We know that if a smoke shop, tobacco shop is under 3,600 square feet, it is, as of right, general retail, loophole in the zoning code, can come in and terrorize a neighborhood 24 hours a day without operations. I have another question for you, Alderwoman. Are you aware of the health complications and diseases that are related to smoking and vaping?
I am, and I do appreciate your work to update the zoning code around smoke shops.
I appreciate you saying that. I've been rebuffed by the zoning department on trying to update and regulate smoke shops and zoning codes. I have taken a back seat to data centers. I have taken a back seat to cannabis cafes. I want to be very clear. Diseases related to smoking cause 443,000 deaths a year, according to the Center of Disease Control. My question to you, I think you know what this is going to be. How many deaths per year did data centers cause?
I don't have an answer for you, Alderman.
If you had to guess, an educated guess, on how many deaths per year does a data center cause?
I'm going to put this in perspective for you. We are looking at an industry that has potential enormous
I couldn't find it.
Implication. You asked me a question, Alderman. I think you and I can go back and forth.
Sure.
Thank you. We are looking at an industry that has potential and has already been seen around the world to have potential on increased greenhouse gas emissions. And we know as a society, and I hope you agree with me, that climate change is one of the biggest threats to our society and to us as people. The number of deaths associated with climate change will continue to grow every single year. And the decisions that we make here as a board of aldermen and people who are residents of the world in general will matter for our children, for their children, and it is something that we need to think about very closely. I understand that you have a concern about smoke shops. I do too. Smoke shops, smoking. I don't know what year, if anyone wants to do some Googling for me, that cigarettes and tobacco became an issue, but it is something that has been in the works for regulation for most of the time they've been in existence. So I'm not asking for anything that's not already happening for the industry that you also seek to further regulate. It is very important to make these considerations, and I fully support your efforts to work that in. If there's anything I can do to help get that in front of the Planning Commission, please ask. I'm here to work with you, Alderman.
Love hearing that. I love hearing that. And I would be starting to approach members of the Planning Commission because I think that is one of the important zoning regulations that needs to immediately get addressed. 443,000 deaths per year directly related to tobacco, not to mention the collapsed lungs that teenagers get as a result of the vaping instruments and the vaping products, and the ability that it's completely unregulated and allowed to be next to schools, churches, daycare centers, unregulated. But no, we're gonna put front and center data centers, which that was some brilliant poetry by you. I'll give you some sense of climate change and the cause of deaths related to climate change, but I'm citing a direct causation. We know there's a direct linkage to tobacco use, vape use, and deaths. That's my point.
Can I do want to answer if there's I don't know if there was a question mark at the end of that, but.
Oh, there's not. But I'll have some more questions. I think the alderman here is called a point of order, which I can't possibly understand the argument.
Alderman from the 9th, could you please state your point of order?
Rule 38, our definition of decorum asks that we stay germane to the subject, and we are not debating tobacco products at this time. We're talking about...
Madam President, we're talking about zoning regulations and comparing one versus the other. Completely germane. I just want a little bit of latitude. I'm about to move off from smoke shops, so thank you.
Can have a tiny bit of latitude, but please bring it back to data centers as quickly as possible.
Okay, you got it. Okay, I'm going to go to the resolution now. Some of the language in it, if that's all right, Alderwoman. Let's see, where is it? Here we go. The third whereas clause, large-scale data centers can require tremendous amounts of water and energy to straining local utilities, potentially impacting residents, utility bills, creating noise, heat pollution, and other nuances that negatively affect the surrounding neighborhoods. Is the word large scale deliberate in there? Do we really feel, because my point is maybe you're trying to isolate one potential project here, or is it just that we want to make sure we're okay with medium or small side data centers, and we really do want to care about the large ones?
I really appreciate that question, because one of the things that we went over in the presentation, both at the Planning Commission and the Public Infrastructure and Utilities Committee, is that there are so many different types and sizes of data centers. There are some that are going to dramatically use resources, and there are some that aren't going to use as many resources. And when we talk about industry and regulation, I think knowing what we're talking about is really important. So that's why you see data centers written differently within the whereas clauses, with whether it's data centers specifically or large-scale data centers in particular, talking about some of the bigger impacts that we could expect to see.
Okay.
So, I mean, I do think it is, that's why this bill goes into, 40 questions that need to be asked during the conditional use process. That's why it goes into the regulation piece
100%.
About the size and the scale of them. This isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, and I think that is something that you would probably agree with.
I absolutely do. It's a fair point. I mean, for the record, I want to let you know I have a master's degree in urban planning and economic development, and what we're trained as planners, and early in the stages of my career, I was a planner. You get as much information from a sponsor as possible. whether it's on the plat, whether it's in the plans, whether it's in the drawing. So I applaud that. These are all questions that the planning division and the zoning division should be asking of sponsors. So now I want to move to the fifth whereas clause because I kind of like that one a lot better, if you would, and I have some questions around that. Whereas on September 10th, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend the Board of Aldermen to enact a moratorium on data centers in the city of St. Louis, but subsequent discussions with a variety of stakeholders have illuminated the path of using the current conditional use process to both allow permit applications to continue while providing more adequate screening of data centers until zoning regulations can be established. It's the second half of this that I really think is finally, a pragmatic home run that we were able to hit here in local government. That this path was illuminated, and it's using current conditional use processes to allow the permit applications to continue, but also providing adequate screening of data centers and zoning regulate. Bravo here, Alderman. I mean, this is good language that I think doesn't scare the economic development community so much and any potential prospects of investment. But I do have a question on it. Who are the stakeholders that we're referring to in this whereas clause?
That's a very good question. So in further conversations on my end, it was talking with members of this Board of Aldermen who, as you know, anytime I have a piece of legislation that I bring forward, I need to convince 7 other people on this board to be on the same page. So that was one group that I worked with. We spoke with environmental groups about the things that they would want to see in a conditional use process and in regulations, talked with labor, developers, people, who are involved in economic development in our city and land use decisions and in environmental groups.
Okay.
Tried to be pretty thorough, to be honest with you, and I think that's why we're here today.
Sure. I'm going to ask a question, and it's not hypothetical, but don't you think that coalition, that gathering, that assembling of stakeholders could have happened much earlier, could have happened without a threat of a moratorium, could have happened in saying, hey, this is a priority of the Planning Commission, we want to make it a priority of the zoning regulations, let's work on it actively, and hey, stakeholder, whether you're a sponsor of a data center, a developer of a data center, an owner of a data center, we're working on these regulations, because I can't imagine more than maybe one data center. I don't know do you have any idea what the average might be of how they come online? I mean, these are $1, $2, $3, $500 million investments. That doesn't come together overnight. I'd be surprised if we have one every 3.5 years, large scale ones potentially that are making permit or application to this. So my point there is there would have been an ability to work on this without a moratorium, without the pomp and circumstance of an executive order, without this resolution that we're discussing today, all, to my point, all sending a dangerous message to the investment community and damaging our potential economic development outlook. And I say that with 23 years of experience financing economic and community development projects. Folks move on. What they see is a schizophrenic and reckless, impulsive, unstable, unpredictable, uncertain local government, and they move to the next town. Are you familiar with the international theory, international relations theory of the anarchic system of states? It's called the realism theory.
Not.
Well, this is right. This is that every country acts in its own self-interest. Whether it gathers with other bordering countries or other regions, every country falls back to acting out of its own self-interest and its own self-determination. And there's an economic development, a local economic development theory that rings true to that same theory, is that we are in competition with Nashville, Indianapolis. And while we applaud those cities and they're part of our Midwest region, we are in direct competition with them, and we should do what's in the exact self-interest of St. Louis day in and day out. My point here is the journey up to this point did not do that. Did not do that. I got a question for you here in a minute. I'm going to keep going. So, moratoriums, in my research and in my knowledge and practice, should be recommended and potentially used in very, very extraordinary circumstances, where there is a direct causation of the use, whether it's threatening to life or prohibiting the health and advancement of residents. There's a practical market response to what we do. We are human starting guns here at the local level of government. And it doesn't help when we have elected officials doubling down, threatening, and almost a Trumpian style threat, if there's not enough public process that we like, we're going to entertain a moratorium. So you better do what we say. That's damaging to economic development. That's not leadership. I do think data centers should be in our economic development tent. Should it be the long pole? Should it be the lead blocker? Of course not. These are critical infrastructure pieces that we need. Should they be regulated? Absolutely. I think the executive order, this resolution, the 40 theses that you've laid out here are all good questions that we should ask. How did we get here? I still don't know. That's all.
Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I want to start by saying I'm not particularly in favor of data centers. I'm a bit of a Luddite. I hate AI, but I think that it looks like, unfortunately, it's part of the future, and we need to get these regulations right. This, to me, feels rushed. There's no need to move as quickly as we are now, that the only future proposed data center has continued their hearing. They're having public open houses on it. Further, in committee, we didn't hear from any subject matter experts, which is kind of a problem. We need to pump the brakes here and get this right. I don't believe that we should be taking urban planning cues from St. Charles County. We're moving too fast here. Will the Alderwoman from the 1st please yield for some questions?
Yes.
Alderwoman from the 1st yield to questions from the Alderman from the 4th.
Yes.
Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you. And thank you, Alderwoman, for yielding. Is there a reason why this is a resolution and not a board bill?
Because it affirms the executive order, which is already in place. This is an opportunity for us to discuss it as a board, and it's also an opportunity for the public to weigh in because we had that committee hearing on it.
Sure, but a board bill would do the same thing and have the force of law behind it, right?
It's affirming an executive order, so that's the direction we chose to go. Of course, you're right. There could have been a board bill instead, but because the executive order was already in place and the regulations are being worked on, we went with the resolution.
Okay, but there was some discussion on which way to move forward, or?
I think the resolution seems like the most straightforward path with already an executive order in place.
Okay, but like a board bill would affirm that executive order the same way and have the force of law behind that would be the legislative body actually acting, right?
This is the legislative body affirming an executive order. A board bill would be putting it into an ordinance, so it's just a different pathway.
Sure, but this isn't really binding in any way.
It is binding our affirmation of the executive order, Alderman. Where are you going with this? Let's get to the next question.
Okay, sure. Yeah,
Whenever you're ready.
This is feel good. I get it. Wouldn't we have the ability? The Board of Aldermen sets water rates, correct?
The Board of Aldermen does help with water rates, yes.
So would we have the ability to charge data centers more money?
Yes, and we should think about that. And it's part of the executive order and this resolution to have the water division directed to look at the rate structure for data centers and recommend what that rate structure should be.
So we could essentially, if we were going to have data centers, we could essentially make data centers invest in our our water infrastructure, our aging.
You're just citing the resolution now. Yes, that is something that we could absolutely do and consider, and I think will.
So, and how many gallons of water did you say that the large scale?
I think Alderman Oldenburg said 150 million gallons of water.
And do we have any concept? I'm just trying to put this into some perspective because that's just a giant number. Do we know how many gallons Anheuser-Busch uses?
I don't off the top of my head.
Okay. I didn't figure you would. I just don't know.
I'll get that for you before
there was any discussion
the hearing,
about that, because I believe that they're our biggest user of water right
now. I think that is true.
So I'm just trying to get the scope of that.
Yes.
And did you have any discussions with planning about how this would, how the ZOOP would affect this, the zoning update plan?
Yes.
Is there any? What was the outcome
I think,
of those discussions?
the zoning update is really important because, as you know, so many things move through either the conditional use process or the process for a variance, which moves through the Board of Adjustment. And there's a lot of different uses in our city that move through one of those processes. And the goal of the ZOOP is to look at our St. Louis, the update to our land use plan, which we just passed. And
Can we please get a little bit more?
I was like, she does
over
not
on
want me to
that
talk
side.
about zoning.
Sorry.
Okay, you're fine. Whoa. Not fun to get gavelled. Yes, there is a lot of discussion about what the zoning update will be able to do around many conditional uses and that are often put through as variants. This is one of those things.
So for any who are curious, the Alderwoman from the 11th just did some Googling for me. Anheuser-Busch uses 1.7 million gallons of water a day at their North plant.
Great.
So just
And I think we also need to look at their water rate, but that's neither here nor there, but I think it's important.
So yeah, ultimately, I'm in favor of regulating things I don't like. That's what we have. That's what I've done since I got here. We did it with short rentals. We did it with, on and on down the list. And this just feels really rushed to me. And I don't see why we have to keep our foot on the gas here. So I can't support this today, but I do support these regulations, and I commend your work on this. Thank you.
We'll go Alderman from the 9th and then Alderwoman from the 6th.
Thank you. First, I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor to this resolution.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that.
I'd just say that while data centers seem to be a new topic on the top of our minds, they have been a growing concern in communities across the United States for the last several years. The power demands from these has surged to the point where a lot of new production needs to be done, and we also know that Missouri has passed a law, specifically Republicans in Missouri have passed a law that allows the cost of producing that new electricity to be passed on to the consumers. So we are acting in an environment that is potentially hostile to our residents and our taxpayers. And we also know that while every data center is not AI, AI is behind the push for more of these data centers at this time. That demand is high because of the proliferation of AI. At the same time that we see a lot of businesses figuring out that AI just doesn't actually work for them. So we don't really know the demand that is going to be happening in the future. Asking to say that we slow down and we ask the questions contained in this executive order, I don't want to get away from the subject here. I think that if you read the resolution, the 40 questions in there are pertinent to how these affect our communities. I'd like you to point, if you don't support this, I'd like you to point to which of those questions you don't think should be asked. Because when I read those questions, I think they're very common sense. I think they're easy to answer if you know what you're proposing. And I think that it is the same as any other regulation. We talked about tobacco and smoke shops. We can talk about gas stations. We can talk about liquor stores. We can talk about all other things that have effects on the communities around them, Airbnbs. So yeah, it is something that is important to get right and slow down and get right. And lucky for us, we are in the process of updating our zoning code. So if you look at the language from even the original moratorium proposal and you look at the language in this, you'll see that it's the same. It's about making sure that our planning staff have the time to make common sense regulations. And it is true that we may be one of the cities that are on the forefront of this right now, which is rare for St. Louis. Normally we're behind other cities. But this very reasonable approach, which was spearheaded by our planning folks, by our mayor's office, by Alderwoman Schweitzer, I think this really does split the difference nicely in making sure that we are clearly saying we welcome your business, we want you to see St. Louis as a future for your industry, but at the same time, we have some questions for you to make sure that this isn't detrimental to our communities. So I am in strong support of this resolution. I'm in strong support of Executive Order 92, and I hope that we can all acknowledge that this is not a bad thing to simply ask some questions. It really is important that we look out for our residents and make sure that the city is honoring its plans. We have good planners in our city. I really want to give a shout out to our planning department because we have a really solid department there with great people. We're lucky to have them, and I trust them to look at this issue closely and advise us on it. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 6th.
Thank you, Madam President. Would the Alderwoman from the 1st yield to questions?
The Alderwoman from the 1st yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 6th.
Yes.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Alderwoman Schweitzer. One, I want to thank you for all your hard work. I know that when dealing with an emerging issue, there are lots of ideas about what it should be, but can you just talk about, because it's my understanding why the initial bill, and this was a moratorium, it was only a moratorium up until there were regulations. Is that correct? So it wasn't necessarily a year moratorium.
Yes, it was up to a year, but until regulations could be in place.
And are there data centers that currently already exist in the city of St. Louis?
Yes.
Do you know how many data centers there are?
At least 12.
So we already have data centers, and I hear the alderman from the second's concerns about, affecting economic development. There are already 12 data centers that do exist right
At least,
now.
yes.
So in dealing with this emerging issue, why we're not going for a moratorium, we are trying to regulate an emerging issue of which already exists, and we really have no regulations in the 12 data centers, for the 12 data centers that exist currently in the city?
Yeah, all of those uses, the downtown zoning area allowed forward without a conditional use hearing if they were in certain zoning districts. So they had been regulated as warehouses. So they was only subject to those same types of regulations.
But as far as the things that we're looking at toward the future for energy usage, for water usage, we're not really tracking what those data centers are doing right now.
City is not tracking that information now.
Okay, great. Well,
And should be, in my opinion.
I agree as well. Thank you for all your hard work. Those are all the questions I have. I would also like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that.
So noted.
Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I just wanted to go on the record and make sure that I thank Alderwoman Schweitzer, Mayor Spencer, your office, the Planning Commission in its entirety for its work on the issue. I have been in Alderwoman Schweitzer's shoes where you are doing something that is quite contentious and controversial, and you learn a lot of new information on the way, and you deal with a lot of voices and a lot of different stakeholders who have a lot of different interests, and that is always difficult to balance. And so I want to make sure that I just acknowledge the position that you're in and how I can imagine like how stressful that can be, especially while you're in the middle of developing a human being. So I just wanted to put that on the record and thank Alderwoman Schweitzer. I also wanted to, for the record, read some things directly from the memo that I think residents at home will find educational. I know there were some previous questions that pointed out some things on the memo and talked about the process, but I want to point out that the Planning Commission is full of professionals. I don't think that professionals were issuing threats. They don't do that. They make recommendations based off of their expertise. They can be wrong like anyone else, but I would definitely caution us to say that they were making a threat. I think they were doing their job. They got a set of information, realized maybe we're not prepared, we need to learn more, and made a recommendation. And I also want to point out on the record that the executive order and the resolution that's in place asks such thorough and thoughtful questions that the data center proposers, developers themselves said, hey, we're going to pause because we don't have all of this information ready to present. So we too think that we should pause, and we're going to ask for continuance because we're not ready and we don't have that information available. And so some information that is directly on the memo, again, this is not from me, this is on the memo, but I think this is important, is some of the things that have come up of concern to members of the public. And I think members of the public have lots of interest and lots of things to think of, including, of course, we all want our city to grow, but they're also balancing expenses and living. And so some of the things that are said in the memo, it is not clear at this time whether specific agreements of this kind are impacting St. Louis ratepayers. However, energy bills are rapidly escalating in St. Louis, and recent changes in state utility law could further raise electric rates by at least $600 annually for the average household. In part, these rate increases are a means to facilitate upgrades to the electric grid, some of which are needed to power the emergence of data centers. Specifically, Senate Bill 4 allowed for construction work in progress, meaning the ratepayers can be charged for construction of new power plants and infrastructure before they're completed and generating energy. I want to repeat that point again, meaning that ratepayers, so current City of St. Louis residents, could be responsible and could be charged for the construction of new power and infrastructure before they're completed and generating energy. I think that point could provide some context on why the Planning Commission might have decided to center and prioritize this issue. Furthermore, the local economic benefits and impacts of data centers are somewhat unclear at this time. Like any new construction project, a data center's construction will create valuable jobs for the period of construction. However, permanent jobs associated with data centers are very limited. Compared to traditional industrial uses, very large data centers require only a small number of people to secure and manage the building. Staff do not yet know about the fiscal benefits of data centers. However, as alluded to above, data center functions successfully integrated into a larger building may strengthen the market position and/or viability of an office or research development. In other words, the right kind of secure, reliable compute power may be one factor that attracts or retains a tech company in a community. I wanted to highlight that again because, again, the Planning Commission is not a political body. They're a factual-based body. I think that last paragraph is them saying, listen, there can be some good outcomes. This can be a part of a good market, but there definitely are some questions to ask. It also reads that the lack of transparency around data center operations means we do not know the impact on our residents in terms of energy demand. For example, where will needed energy come from during peak demand hours? Who is paying to build new energy generation facilities to support demand? Like other utilities across the country, Ameren is challenged in managing data centers' impact on the grid. If utilities are unable to lock in the right long-term guarantees for new data centers, the cost of new infrastructure could fall entirely on other consumers. Again, those consumers in this case would be City of St. Louis residents. So I really just wanted to remind us that experts who are professionals who are trained in this, I know that was mentioned earlier, they have a variety of credentials with them. They made the decision that they need a pause, and I don't think it was with the intent of threat and all. I think it was just recognizing this is a new topic we need to learn. I want to make sure that as we discuss this body and we talk about the economic interests, we also think of the impact that this could have on our families and residents who are already experiencing utility rates that are very high. And I also want to encourage my colleagues to read into Senate Bill 4 if you haven't. Essentially, that bill that was passed at the state does give a green light to say that you can absolutely put a data center in place and you can have the residents pay for it. I think that's very interesting given that it doesn't say that residents have to get the profit from the facilities, but it does say that they could be responsible for some of those utility expenses. Obviously, this is a conversation we have all the time about the trade-offs of how you should incentivize these things or not. I don't think the goal of that commission was to say no data centers ever once again. I think it was to say that we need a pause on this action. And so I wanted to just thank Again, Alderwoman Schweitzer for her work. I want to thank the Planning Commission. I want to thank the many residents who showed up, whether you were in support or whether you were in opposition, to be a part of this conversation. And I also want to encourage us to be mindful and to look at other places. Again, I've had residents send me many emails. I've had experts reach out. I'm sure we all have. And I do want to say that data centers in itself is a very vague term. They don't all use the same amounts of energy. They don't all have the same energy sources. They come in a variety of sizes. They require different amounts of staff. Data centers are so vague that it can be difficult to legislate something if you still need time to learn about the intricacies. And my hope is that having this resolution, having this executive order, having people be at the table, be more thoughtful, will allow us to put it forth those thoughtful regulations that should be in place. But I do want us to look at other cities that have put these things into place and be mindful of some of the impacts that have happened. Not saying that these will absolutely happen in the city of St. Louis, but there are examples in Memphis, there are examples in Louisiana, places where data centers went, and you don't have to take my word for it. When they cut their water on, the pressure is way less. The water runs dark. And oftentimes what happens is sometimes these centers go and set up in those communities, and once they use all the resources, they go to another. Again, that does not mean that will happen, because we are still using data center in a very vague term. All data centers are not AI centers. All data centers do not use the same source of energy. But I absolutely think that it is the correct thing to do for us to take a pause and to really think about it. And I think the best evidence of that fact is the fact that developers themselves said, we agree, we need more time to provide this information. So I want to again thank those in leadership and thank the public for coming, and I look forward to having more discussion on this issue, and I would like to be added as a co-sponsor. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that.
So noted.
Alderwoman from the 8th.
Thank you. I'm still clearly learning how to use the mics around here. Or maybe it's just mine. I don't know. But anyway, thank you, Madam President. As a member of the
Alderwoman from the 8th, if you could speak more into the microphone, we can hear you.
It's a little short. This is okay. Can I do this?
That works.
Okay. Thank you. One day I'll figure it out, y'all. As a member of the Public Infrastructure Committee, I did have the opportunity to sit with my colleagues and hear all of the public testimony. And I do recognize how important this issue has become to our community and how many stakeholders have expressed interest in making sure that we take the right approach on this issue. I do want to express and recognize the Alderwoman for all the effort that she put to get this resolution to this point. The biggest concern that I expressed in committee that I'll also share here on the floor is acknowledging that this process is going to be a temporary process as the Planning Commission works to flesh out their approach to regulating data centers, and with the rules being use hearings that we're going to be doing in the interim, I do want to make sure that we allow for flexibility as we learn and understand more about data centers, the difference between data centers and what we do. So I did think it was very important, even though we have outlined these 40 questions with the resolution, to make sure that we're not signaling to communities that are interested in bringing these things here that we're wanting to deter that, but we just want to make sure that if data centers do come to the city of St. Louis, that we're mitigating the concerns that our constituents and our residents will have. And I think that signal is an important signal, but one that we have to make very delicately. So that was the concern that I expressed and that I think we have addressed with getting the resolution to this point, not saying that we want to have a full moratorium on data centers, because again, I think we're all understanding we don't necessarily know what that even means. But we're saying we want to take a look at it. We're saying we want to allow the planning department to do their research, and we need an interim process. And I just want to caution us as we're in this interim process that we do be cognizant of the impact to this on a citywide basis. What may work from one area and one community may not work for another area or another community. So I think it's just important for us to be thoughtful. But I do see this resolution as a good compromise for where we are right now and a roadmap for where we can potentially go to make sure that we're being thoughtful about this approach.
Alderman from the 5th, and then I'll go to Alderman from the 14th.
Madam President, I rise in cautious support of this particular resolution. I too want to thank the Alderman for the tremendous amount of work and thoughtfulness and investigation she put into this particular project. As I mentioned during the hearing the other night, I appreciate also your ability to evolve and move off the initial position that you put forward with respect to the moratorium. I didn't like that. I like this better. Now, having said that, as a member of the committee who sat through 2.5 hours of testimony on Wednesday night, I think it is important to remember what we heard from the utility representatives that were present. And this is one of my concerns, is that we had one representative present that talked that particular night, and that was from Ameren. And I will point out that a 2-minute explanation or statement on behalf of that utility in connection with the tremendous amount of concern raised by our residents, whether it is true or not, was insufficient. Ameren must be at the table moving forward. So I want to look at the next step. As I read the mayor's executive order, my understanding is that the building division has essentially about 4 months on the clock to prepare those interim requirements. My encouragement is to have that utility involved. What I heard on Wednesday night, with all due respect to anybody who is quoting Senate Bill 4, was that the utility made clear that the costs associated with these data centers would not be pushed indirectly upon to the residents of the city of St. Louis. What I heard, and again, it was an extremely short presentation, basically just points, was that the utility is willing to work with these centers to make sure that the cost of infrastructure, the cost of supplying the power, and the power itself is borne by the folks that are using it. In other words, the developers of the data centers. That's what I heard. So I think it's very important that as we are being heard by the public, that we understand what the utilities representative said the other night with respect to Senate Bill 4. I think it's essential. My other concern is, frankly, we haven't heard from our water division. There's been a lot of talk about the cost associated with water, the fragility of our system, or maybe on the other side, depending on how we look at it, how vigorous it is. We all know the quality. Frankly, I'm of the belief that we have a real asset here in the city of St. Louis with respect to our water department. But the other night, we didn't hear from that department. So, looking ahead, my request, and again, I am going to vote in favor of this resolution, is that the water department be consulted, that it be considered, and that it be at the table along with Ameren when our building division is creating those interim regulations. I'd like to close by also stating, Alderwoman, I think what this resolution does, and I think what your work has accomplished, is the recognition that certain guardrails are required, that the city of St. Louis should not be run roughshod by anybody. And it's an acknowledgement that this is very new technology, the potential for a wonderful infrastructure development, but frankly, we do need common sense regulations, guardrails. And I think what this resolution does is it attempts to put those in place. So again, thank you for your time, and I'll turn it back over.
Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I also want to thank the Alderwoman from the 1st for being, I think, not rushing this so fast, and I may be contradicting myself here, but I know, we spend a lot of time talking, and I know she's not one to try to move things quickly. I know after planning had voted for the moratorium, you could have introduced the bill, and I think I was listening to the discussion. Planning was like, how quick can we get this done? He was like, we can have a bill like this Friday, but that didn't happen. You didn't do any like legislation on a moratorium. We seen the executive order from the mayor, and then you came with the resolution. And I know when you're working on something, you try to have conversations with all your colleagues. That's one thing that I respect about you. I also am like the alderman from the 5th, cautiously supporting this because I do believe that we need, he say guardrails, I'll say regulation, or some type of understanding and standards for not just data centers, but how we build several things in the city of St. Louis. My concern is, which I also rarely do, is agree with the alderman from the 2nd. The conversation around this, and also appreciate our friends in the gallery and the 11,000 individuals who have signed a petition to say no data centers. I thank everybody who came out. But in my time of being here in the last 2 years, this is probably the first and the last month as an alderperson who represents, I live across the street from a data center, This is really, I feel like, the first time as an elective body have had a conversation around data centers. So I think when you hear some of the concerns from some of my colleagues that are saying they're cautious to support it or asking questions about the process is because it's not like we've been talking about data centers, at least since I've been here for the last 2 years. And I agree with the alderman of the 5th, because my fear is if we vote for this or if we don't, what's going to happen is, with no disrespect to our media friends in the back, they're going to report on this and say the Board of Aldermen took a stance. And the reality is, like the alderman from the 5th said, I don't think we have all the information. You hear from one side saying it takes up a lot of electricity, it takes up a lot of water. Then on the other side, we didn't have the experts at the public infrastructure meeting. We didn't have our water department there to speak. We had airmen there to speak for 2 minutes. Well, we've had several other hearings on bills like unhoused. And when you talk about going through planning, I appreciate the staff that planning does. I appreciate the work. But I think the alderwoman from the 7 had to have alderwoman from the 7 had to have 2 hearings on that piece of legislation just in planning. Then in actual committee, she had to probably have 3 to 4 hearings. And I mean, we know much about shelters. We know we need more shelters. But what I'm saying is, this is just going to be a resolution. This is just codifying and saying, yay, we agree with the mayor that we need the things that are in place. This isn't like it's an ordinance or a board bill, which is, I think different from a different resolution we did today, that a board bill will be coming later on that. But it would be great, I think, for this to have been slowed down and not just have one committee hearing on it. And actually had more time. There was over, probably 30, 40 people there from community, from labor, from utilities, and everyone just got 2 minutes to say, hey, this is where I am, this is where I'm not, and there was no presentation. And I know public infrastructure, you guys usually do great with always having experts come and talk about the process. I think the water department has been at that committee several times giving detailed hours and testimony on, why we need to fund the water department more. But it didn't happen in this process. And I think that is the concern with a lot of alders, is that while some of us may be voting for it, some of us cautiously may be voting for it, some may not. I think the reality is we don't have enough information. We don't have the data. We don't have the numbers. We don't have the facts. We don't know out of the 10 to 15 that are in the city of St. Louis, how many are big, how many are small, how much energy are they using, how much energy are they not using, how much water are we using. We are just literally going off of some energy that's happened from St. Charles, and then, planning put it on the agenda. From there, the mayor came up with an executive order, and here we are all within a month time frame, saying we're about to vote out this resolution and haven't had the time to sit down with all the advocates that are doing the work, or the utility companies, or the water, or the utility companies' water, or the union, about are we making the right decision to do conditional use, to do a moratorium, I think this is one of those things that, since it's a resolution, there could have been another committee hearing next week. The board doesn't go down to like December 5th, where there could have been more engagement around this process so that we, as elected officials, as there's been conversation on the floor, it's been said multiple times, I do not know. I do not have the answers. I do not know. And for us to make an informed decision, even though it's a resolution, I would just say that we have spent more time on things that have been conversations for months at this Board of Aldermen compared to something that, at least from the board stance and from the planning, has come up with just, 4 weeks ago, and now we're voting on it. So I hope that we, as a body and as a public infrastructure committee, if we're going to vote on this, great, but take the time to actually do more homework to figure out what these data centers do, because it's not like they haven't existed in our city, and there's plans for more, and I'm glad people are organizing around that. I do not think the one that may be coming in the Armory should be that, but I do like that there's going to be guardrails, but I do think we need more time, and this process does seem a little rushed from planning to public infrastructure to now being on the floor. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I do, would the Alderwoman from the 1st yield to questioning?
The Alderwoman from the 1st yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 7th?
Yes.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Alderwoman. I'm glad that we were able to speak and I was able to kind of talk to you about what I'm going to ask. I think we're all here to represent our constituents, and I just have some questions that I promised I would ask. I think we've had a lot of conversations, so my hope is that if there are any residents that are watching or will watch this later, that this conversation can provide some helpful context to the issue. And I think that there are just different levels of education. I can say I was one of those people, this was a lot new, and I found that I had a lot of residents who had information, but I will do my job as your representative and ask the questions. So Alderwoman Schweitzer, I think this kind of goes along with Alderman Oldenburg's questions a little earlier, but could you talk about the decision to pivot and not continue with the moratorium as recommended by the Planning Commission and to do the executive order and resolution instead?
Thank you, Alderwoman, for the question. I think anybody watching here today can see that people in this board, there is a mix of feelings on both the resolution possibly being too fast and what the moratorium would have done. So if you are somebody who, like I am, who tries to count votes and understand where people are on an issue before I bring something forward, before I move on it, I think you could probably tell how a moratorium would have gone on this Board of Aldermen.
Thank you. I know it was mentioned earlier too, with another set of questioning, just, the regulations that we're considering around these facilities. I know, the unhoused legislation came up earlier. We're talking a lot about that. Something that came up to me a lot when we were having a conversation around kind of shelters and their place in communities and how they do or don't belong in certain places. It was a lot of emphasis on democracy and making sure that residents have input into these processes because they will impact their neighborhoods. Have you been a part, since this conversation started quite some time ago, can you talk about some of the conversations you've heard in regards to regulations being conversed about? And can you also, has Plaid and Petition on data centers, has that been a part of the conversation, and anything else I know we require public hearings, but anything else around regulations of public engagement and democratic buy-in?
I appreciate that. So it listed in one of the item J here in the regulatory framework that needs to be included for data centers going forward is public outreach and community engagement requirements before, during, and after development. That hasn't been further defined. I agree with everyone in here who has said that we need more time on this. That is part of the reason why it is a resolution affirming an executive order. Those can be changed much more easily than ordinances can, and they do move much faster than ordinances can. So it allows us to both put some guardrails in place now and put some expectations in the public's mind for what the discussion should be and how to engage now and what they should expect to see going forward. So a big part of that is the public engagement with data centers, but whether it's Plaid petition, whether it's specific amount of hearings, whether it's some other form of engagement is still very much in discussion. I think something that we should talk about through this process.
Thank you, Alderwoman. That's the end of my questioning. Thank you. I will just add for context that I know that the word moratorium is a big bad word, but I really do think that we're all saying that we think we need a pause because we don't know, and I think that was the point of what the moratorium was supposed to be, a pause, as we are all saying that we don't know, we need more time. And I think the word moratorium just kind of allowed some political conversations. It kind of got very politicized, but most times when we don't know, we pause. That's like how it usually goes while people collect more information. I think that was the intention. But again, I'm really thankful for the robust conversation that we had today. I really appreciate the Public Infrastructure Committee for holding that and sitting through hours of testimony and hearing from community. And I look forward to us having this conversation more.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, Alderwoman from the 1st, you are recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I do appreciate what the Alderwoman from the 7th just shared, that we need more time. A moratorium was one way to get there. Another way to get there, I think, is outlined in this executive order and this accompanying resolution, which puts in place a much more intensive conditional use process, as well as make sure that there is not a data center that will go forward in the city of St. Louis after the executive order has been signed that will be permitted by right, which means anytime a data center is in front of us until regulations are in place, and likely after that, because we continue public engagement, there would not be a data center going in that doesn't have many more questions asked about it, a lot more public engagement on it, and more of those guardrails and guidelines that I keep hearing people talk about. Alderman from the 2nd pointed out the self-interest that people act in. I would argue that environmental concerns and land use concerns are very much in the self-interest of the people who live in the city of St. Louis. They're certainly in mine. I mentioned this during the hearing, but as someone who is expecting, I don't know that there's much more that I'm concerned about than the kind of world that my child will live in, and whether or not they will have access to clean drinking water, whether they will have electricity that is reliable, can afford, and whether or not their city that they live in will be taken advantage of by an industry that it frankly doesn't understand. So when I think about those things, that is my self-interest, and I think a lot of the people I represent. We did hear from subject matter experts during the hearing this past Wednesday. We heard from many of them. Did we hear enough from them? Absolutely not. But did we hear from them? Yes. Do we need to hear more? Yes. This gives us time. It sets up a framework for both the questions that will be asked in the conditional process, as well an expectation for people to understand what regulations are being considered. I know that I have discussions in being set up with many of those subject matter experts. I plan to stay very involved in this topic going forward. Speaking of guidelines and guardrails, we do need an interim process now for data centers, whether it's the one in front of us, in front of the conditional use hearing that was postponed in front of the Board of Public Service, or the other ones. I know many of the people in this room told me, hey, a few data centers have reached out to me. They're concerned about this moratorium. So to say there's only one data center that's being considered in the city of St. Louis, I know all of you know is not true. There are others that have come to us that have said that they're interested. So just saying that is just not true. And one of the things I feel like this resolution does, executive order does, is it's made almost no one happy. And I feel as an elected representative how regularly it is our job to take all of the pieces of information that exist and get it down to a point where we have consensus and movement forward. I think that is one of the biggest roles that we have as people in government. We are going to get beat up no matter what side of the issue we are on so regularly, but when we find a path that gets to the bottom lines of so many stakeholders, I think we're doing a good thing. Does that make everyone happy? Does that make anyone happy? But we are working on it, and I think that is important. I do appreciate the need for companies like our utility providers and Ameren to be involved in these conversations. And I also appreciate the fact that there are goals that have been set for greenhouse gas emissions in our city, in Ameren's coverage area. And when you look at the energy needs that these data center has, that is a hockey stick of how much demand that they are expecting to have in this coverage area. And while I appreciate the efforts around the renewable energy and all of that work, in a meeting I had with Ameren just a few months ago, they were talking about how it's never going to be enough. It's not going to be enough for our current needs. Add on a hockey stick of needs of energy in our region, those goals become just not possible. And I think it is really important for us to be realistic. We are expecting the fox to guard the hen house if we think that the utility providers are the ones who should be telling us what is going to happen with our utility rates and with what they're going to be providing. They should absolutely be at the table, but when you look at its self-interest, please be reasonable about who you're talking to. I want to just say in closing that this is a starting point. It is not the end of the discussion. It's very much the beginning of the discussion. And I really appreciate everyone for taking the time. I know we could have just not had the discussion at all. We could have just let the mayor sign an executive order and abdicated our responsibility as a board to discuss emerging issues. But I appreciate the people who have taken the time to look at this, give their opinions, talk to me about it, and I will be taking a lot more time on this issue, as I think we all will. And I do hope that you all are able to support what I think is a pretty reasonable resolution today, and I renew my motion. Thank you.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th. We adopt Resolution 111. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Aye.
Alderman Odenberg. Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan. Alderman Devoti. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sonier. Alderwoman Cox-Santui. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark-Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. Alderwoman Keys.
President Green.
I'm sorry, President Green.
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. We have 10 aye votes and 2 no votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 1st to adopt Resolution 1.
Report from the HUD, from the Housing, Urban Development, and Zoning Committee.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on Mayor Spencer's appointment to the Board of Adjustment.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we approve Mayor Spencer's appointments to the Board of Adjustment.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we approve Mayor Spencer's appointment to the Board of Adjustment. Is there any discussion? Alderwoman from the 8th.
Affirm my support of this appointment for Jim Dallas to the Board of Adjustment. Jim Dallas has been a great member of the Soulard community and was very instrumental in a lot of progress, especially expanding the Soulard SID. So I think he would be a great addition to the Board of Adjustment, and I support the mayor's appointment.
Any further discussion? Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I also think Mr. Dallas would be a great addition to this board, as well as Mr. Dean Vine, who lives in the 14th Ward. They both have impeccable resumes. Mr. Dean lives in Hyde Park, but the work that she does for the city of St. Louis just does not stop at the boundaries of the ward that she lives in. She's been involved in College Hill. We heard from the meeting that she's helped out even in the first ward on different issues. So, you know, the Board of Adjustment is a big board, and I think both of these people that are going to be put on this board not only has a great resume, but has the grit to do the work, but I think they're going to make a great addition to the Board of Adjustment.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 10th.
I just wanted to echo to the support for both of these nominations. When we were able to hear from them in the HUD's committee this past Tuesday, it really proved their commitment. They really showed their commitment to the city of St. Louis in this unique way that they're able to serve their city. And Ms. Sapa, who is over boards and commissions, did a great job of not only explaining, and our zoning commissioner, administrator rather, Ms. Mary Hart Burton did a great job of explaining what this position does, the importance of it, the role, the commitment, and again, them coming and showing and sharing their support made the difference as well. So if anyone would even want to still serve, I just want to make sure that people, that our listeners know that there's still positions to serve the city this way, and I renew my motion to support the mayor's appointments to the Board of Adjustment.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderperson from the 7th, that we approve Mayor Spencer's appointments to the Board of Adjustment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Report from the Personnel and Administration Committee.
Would like to entertain a motion that portions of that the Board of Aldermen go into closed session to under public provisions of section 610.0213 and 610.022 in order to permit the members of the committee to discuss matters related to the hiring, firing, disciplining, or promoting of members of the Board of Aldermen. I need a motion. So moved from the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Odenberg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Devoti. Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Saunier. Alderwoman Cox-Santui. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Odenberg. Alderwoman Keys. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. We have 12 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion. STL TV, if you could please place us in closed session. If everyone except for Roslyn and Tracy could please vacate the chambers, and if the gallery could be cleared if it hasn't been already.
Oh, she said, go back.
A few minutes.
Tuesday, September 7th, HUD's meeting at 11 a.m. in the Kennedy Room. Thursday, Personnel Administration Committee, 11 a.m. in the Kennedy Room. Friday, 10 o'clock, October 10th at 10 a.m., full board meeting in the chambers.
Any further announcements? Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you. Just want to invite everyone to the Grove this weekend on Saturday. That's tomorrow, 3 to 11 p.m. We're having Grove Fest. It's always a good time. There's multiple stages, live music, activities for kids. It's just always a lot of fun. It's a great way to show off the neighborhood and everything we've done there. So please come down. Everyone's welcome.
Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Not this Thursday, but next Thursday, so October 16th, Public Safety will have a meeting at 2 p.m. in the Kennedy Room, and we're going to take up Alderman Devote's Board Bill 62 regarding ordinances, regarding golf cart ordinances. I know that there's a lot of people want to weigh in on that, so I want to make sure to announce it as early as possible. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 8th.
Thank you, Madam President. This weekend, downtown tomorrow morning is Sisters Strut downtown, which is the Breast Cancer Awareness Walk beginning at 9 a.m. I would like to invite everyone to join for that as well.
Alderwoman from the 6th.
Thank you, Madam President. This weekend is the Shaw Art Fair on Saturday and Sunday, so please stop by, buy some art, and support the local economy. Thank you.
Any further announcements? Alderwoman from the 10th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Tomorrow, there'll be a National Night Out one-stop shop given by the Federation of Block Units at the Urban League under the direction of Mike McMillan and Furkan Shigag. This will be from starting at 11 a.m. at 1408 North Kings Highway. In the parking lot, there'll be engagement, education, empowerment, and elevation, free food, and fun for the family, but also you'll be able to engage with St. Louis City departments and first responders and take information back to then your National Night Out events that are planned for Tuesday on the 7th. Please, everyone be safe. I wish everybody a great National Night Out event, and I hope to see you all out in the community.
Any further announcements? Alderwoman from the 1st.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This weekend in Carondelet Park, there is the first Fall Festival hosted by the Friends of Carondelet Park. It is from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m., starting at the bandstand. Over 40 local vendors. It's going to be a great time. And if you haven't had a chance to check out the goats that are doing some work in our city's third largest park to clear out an overgrown area, you can go and visit them while you're at the festival. So let me know if you have any questions about that, and I hope to see you at Carondelet Park this weekend. Thanks.
Any further announcements? So I want to make sure I give a shout out to the Best of Missouri Market. That's also going on this weekend. Starts this evening at the Botanical Gardens, and a great opportunity to get started on your holiday shopping. So I will be there this evening. Hope to see some of you. With that, Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the motion to excuse.
Thank you, Madam President. All members were present this morning.
With that, Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, I move that we adjourn until Friday, October 10th, 2025, in the Board of Aldermen chambers at 10 a.m.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adjourn until Friday, October 10th, 2025, in the Board of Aldermen chambers at 10 a.m. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned with the exception of the Alderman from the 14th.